30 years ago, you might not have expected to see a Korean boy band speaking at the White House, and yet we're seeing now an increased flow of ideas between cultures brought about by an increasingly globalized society. So, today we're going to be talking about these cultural economies through the lens of Seiji and Appadurai. My name is Arabella, and I'll be presenting with Kira, Josh, Lucy, and Aiden. So to start, let's go over the Tuesday reading by Arjun Appadurai. Appadurai is a professor of media, culture, and communication at NYU. He has taught in universities around the United States and has also been invited to speak at universities around the world. He is a widely respected and leading voice in globalization and culture and how those intersect. And he has also been brought on to be a consultant or advisor with organizations such as UNESCO and the World Bank, as well as with the Ford or Rockefeller Foundations, just major organizations around the world, making him a really valuable voice to turn to when having these discussions about culture and globalization. So, what is he talking about in his chapter, Disjuncture and Difference in the Global Cultural Economy? Well, first off, he is talking about this idea that cultures are not really going to be easily classified into neat systems now that globalization is creating increasingly interconnected systems. And so it's easier, according to Appadurai, or more practical to think of culture as an intersection of these five main scapes of ethnoscapes, ideascapes, politiscapes, mediascapes, and financescapes. This shifting of people and ideas and technology and media and all of these intersections creating and shifting cultures. And that what is going to happen is that these are going to change. These cultural practices or these different aspects are going to change as they come in contact with local areas, and those local areas are in turn going to interact with them. So, not necessarily globalization, a little bit, but again, a little bit more complex in that it is not just a one to one interaction between one entity and another, but a bunch of different entities all exchanging these different scapes, so to say, and influencing these scapes around the world. So one of these phenomenons that Appadurai mentions is this idea of nostalgia without memory, something that I wanted to highlight because our team will be speaking about this later on in the presentation. And it's essentially this idea that previously there was a simplified idea of developing nations being the future of developed nations being the future of the developing world. And so our present in the United States might be what somebody in the developing nation is aspiring to. And that similarly, our past is what the developing nations are currently experiencing. But what Appadurai is saying is that basically this system, we're all communicating with each other and exchanging ideas and media and technology. And so it's not going to be that linear. So you're going to end up with this idea of this nostalgia without memory. And his example that he gives is the Philippines and this love of older American music that they might then have this nostalgia for that music without having the memory of the cultural context that led to the creation of that music. And so these pasts and presents and futures are all overlapping. And this is going to be really clearly seen with K-pop and that interaction of these different times compressed by modern technology and modern globalization. But I will let my partners speak on that more. Another idea that Appadurai talks about is this idea of the nation state conflict and this battle of imaginations. So, nations are wanting to take over the state and be in control, and then states are wanting to monopolize the idealisms and values of the nation to better monopolize or unify the state. And this is becoming heightened by globalization and these constantly shifting ideas of the local culture. And so these two forces, also by the technology and the media that's spreading all these different messages and the way each group, both the nation and the state, are using the media and using culture and people um, to heighten power or try to unify each other is just heightening this conflict. And one of the phenomenons that Appadurai mentions is deterritorialization, where people are increasingly going to other countries and then creating this imagined homeland, essentially, and leading to greater radicalization and further feeding into the nation state conflict. Finally, another aspect of society that is particularly affected by this globalization and these shifting scapes is gender roles. So, there's conflicting ideas of what gender roles should be based on historical practices. And as people are immigrating and bringing in those ideas of gender roles into different locations, and then the media also bringing in different ideas of gender roles, all of these are in flux and influencing each other, particularly as finances are shifting and how they are working. And so now increasingly women are expected to join the workforce. So all of this, in a sense, is talking about markets still a little bit, because it's this flow of capital in the finance scapes, the flow of money, international investments, the flow of technology between different countries, and particularly the flow of labor or ethnoscapes. So people are moving for various reasons and they're bringing culture, but they're also bringing labor. And so that's also influencing the way that economies are working and what is happening in different economies around the world. And it's also Apadure's writing is also highlighting the ways in which these states and societies are deeply shaped by these global flows of technology, ideas, media, all of that. And in some ways, exacerbating tensions and really dramatically changing the face of societies around the world.
So now we shift our focus to this week's second reading, which is titled Spinning South Korean Cultural Industry for Soft Power and Nation Branding, which is written by Cedar Bao T. Seiji, which I am almost positive I butchered. Anyway, before diving into the article's content, I want to provide some brief background information about the author. So, Seiji is a professor and researcher who focuses mainly on studying East Asian cultures. She has spent much of her time exploring modern Korean culture, specifically performance and entertainment. She approaches issues such as gender and cultural policy through examining all types of entertainment from popular Korean television dramas to K pop. This week's reading encapsulates her studies to a T, and she is clearly as credible as anyone to be writing about the Korean entertainment industry. It is an extremely niche topic, and she has devoted her life studies to it, so we just gotta trust her. Anyway, so now for the reading itself. Gotta move slides. So, for a brief summary, this article is about the theory that Hallyu, which means rapid international popularity of Korean media, was created entirely through the Korean government and also like run by the Korean government. Um, while it is perfectly normal and expected for governments to endorse and support their country's cultural industry, it is believed that Hallyu is more of an artificial government creation. In response to this belief, Seiji recites the history of government intervention in Korean cultural industries. She states that, like any country, the Korean government has loosened policies and regulations to provide more freedom more freedom to creators. It follows the same idea that the government can manipulate the economy by changing laws and regulations. Just like how a professional sports league can manipulate the product of a sport by altering the rule book. It's kind of a similar concept. Anyway, overall, Hallyu has changed the perception of South Korea tremendously. Only a few decades ago, Korea was associated with war, protests, and gloom, and through the Hallyu transformation, the country has been rebranded as a, quote, glistening country full of romance. Although Hallyu has had positive effects on South Korea, there are negatives that must be mentioned, particularly internationally. The concept of relying on entertainment or on the entertainment media industry to be the primary economic generator has proven to be unreliable, or at least when compared to the trade of tangible essential goods. Because the entertainment industry is categorized as a want rather than an essential, countries have the ability to boycott or avoid supporting the industry. This cannot be done with other goods. For example, no matter how much a country may dislike Saudi Arabia, they simply have no choice but to keep trading with them to bring in oil for the country. Countries such as China, Russia, and Turkey have strongly opposed the Korean entertainment industry for many reasons, but one reason, according to the article, is for the controversial style of masculinity modeled by K pop stars. Because of their distaste for the Korean entertainment culture, these governments have encouraged their citizens to stop supporting the industry. They've even implemented laws to mandate this belief. For example, China officially started censoring Chinese artists Chinese artists that have been emulating K-pop aesthetic. So, also the next topic discussed in the reading is an interesting one, and that is that due to Korea's image being built by celebrities, there is a ripple effect that impacts the country's reputation. The article cites examples such as K-pop fan involvement in Trump rallies and also in protests in Thailand. So it's just things the country wouldn't want to be associated with on either side. And essentially, while the popularity of Korean celebrities have resulted in tremendous marketing for the country, it also leads to controversy and impacts the reputation of the country. Finally, the article concludes by stating that Hallyu's success has far more to do with the creativity and talent of individual Koreans than it does from the government influence. For example, viral award winning films and shows such as Squid Game and Parasite struggle to find domestic backing, but have since won international acclaim despite this. So, that sums up the main points of the article. It is definitely interesting to learn and examine such a unique mode of economic income. And my group mates will take it from here and address the article in greater detail.
All right, so this is Lucy, and I will be talking about Seiji's evidence in his article. So Seiji primarily talks about the concept of Hallyu, which is a catch-all term for the international popularity of South Korean media products, otherwise known as the Korean Wave. An example of this that he utilizes is Psy's Gangnam Style, which was a really big hit, obviously, in the early 2010s. It was like internationally successful and it's very well known. And this is because of Hallyu, because the Korean government promoted Gangnam Style and Psy's kind of overall message was backed by the government. And then in 1999, the Basic Law for Cultural Industries Promotion was passed, and this led way to the Korea Creative Content Agency being developed, which is an agency that promotes and facilitates cultural industries throughout the world, focusing on Korea. So this can be either donating to museums or spreading Korean culture internationally throughout cultural centers all over the world. And this ties back into Hallyu in the sense that these agencies are promoting what the government wants to promote. So like Psy, um, different elements of Korean culture that they want to spread throughout the entire world. A government supporting a domestic industry is very different than a government creating Hallyu or being responsible for its worldwide popularity. I mean, this is a point that Seiji makes very clear. For example, he shows that Parasite and Squid Game, Korean forms of media that were not aided by Hallyu, are still financially and internationally successful. And Seiji's argument is essentially this first point that even though governments can promote something or different forms of media like BTS throughout the world internationally, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be successful, and that doesn't mean that the success of those forms of media or those creators is due to Hallyu exclusively. And then he also makes the point that industry politics play a role in distribution of Hallyu. In 2016, the Korean government accepted construction of a sort of alliance with the US. This anchored China. And as South Korea's most visible, least legally protected, and least essential export product, as Seiji says, Korean industries paid the biggest price for this system being implemented. And another example of industry politics playing into Hallyu and its distribution is the BTS presidential appearances. So basically, BTS was seen with the Korean president in 2018, and obviously, because the Korean government was able to utilize BTS in a way that promoted the Korean government, they were going to get more support rather than a group or creator who doesn't support the government. Seiji ends with the quote that this is no fluke. Hallyu's success ultimately can be traced not to government backing, but to the imagination and creativity of individual Koreans. And I think this is kind of the whole point of his argument that despite that success that may come with Hallyu, that just because a group is successful and has Hallyu does not mean they are successful only because of the Hallyu. Thank you.
This is Josh, and in my part of the presentation, I'm going to be talking about what would Appadurai think about Seiji's writing. I think it's important when talking about ethnoscapes, mediascapes, and audioscapes to start off with what did Appadurai think the suffix scape meant. In page 33 of his writing this week, he said that the suffix scape allows us to point out fluid, irregular shapes of these landscapes, shapes that characterize international capital as deeply as they do international clothing styles. And this is something important that I'll bring up later when I'm talking about international clothing styles and the impact of the globalization of K-pop. To start off with ethnoscapes, there's government and political relations that are completely tied between BTS and Korea. We can see this through how K-pop has changed relationships with countries like China, Russia, and Turkey that I'll talk about later, as well as how Hallyu directly affects Korean politics through their stars' actions for the better or for worse, as Seiji points out. Seiji also points out that there is economic influences from groups like BTS and how this affects their politics. When talking about mediascapes in K-pop, we can see YouTube videos like we saw in class, and social media. K-pop and BTS is everywhere. They're on TV. But as Appadurai points out, mediascapes only give a small sliver of Korean culture that is majority controlled by politics in some situations. So it is super hard to get a full grasp of the culture through just these mediascapes that are portrayed on YouTube and TV like we're seeing in class, when we can't really get a full grasp of South Korean culture just through these YouTube videos. In audioscapes, BTS has songs like No More Dream and NO that have very politicized messages that protest the South Korean student demographic, where they're forced to work and be study machines. In the music video for NO, they have the members of BTS being forced to take pills and sit there and do math equations while they are being watched over, directly showing the similarity of the lifestyle that Korea puts on their students. And in the song No More Dreams, they have direct translations of words like who made us study machines, who will take responsibility for us living the lives of puppets, and will this reality make our parents happy? And No More Dream directly talking about how they want to see a change and how they are sick of it being a dream. Moving on to Appadurai saying identity is formed in local and global globalization. Like we talked about in class, global cultures are shown in BTS through different Asian clothing styles, like we saw with their komodos and Japanese, or more Japanese traditional ribbons, and their dance moves, as well as American hip hop culture and their Jordan 1s and big flashy chains, which is something that Americans look a lot into. Moving on, BTS has marketing as a memory and nostalgia without memory going hand in hand. As Arabella points out earlier, nostalgia without memory is something that Appadurai brings up when a group co-ops a part of another group's culture, whether that be clothing, technology, slang, a lifestyle, etc. Without having the same cultural history as a South Koreans. Arabella brought up the example of Filipinos and how in a song like American Pie, they might not even have had a pie before, but still have a nostalgia effect when they hear these old American traditional songs. But in K-pop, I would argue that it may be even stronger. As in K-pop, most of the songs are in Korean with little English, so fans could be singing No More Dreams, a song with a lot of political influence that directly talks about how Korean government is forcing students to do things that they don't want to do. Without knowing the words that they're singing and having a nostalgic connection to the song with no experience of the South Korean government and their effect on the students. This is also directly marketing a memory of people remembering this song, although they don't know what the words mean. Another example that we talked about in class is that boy bands in the US are far outdated, and younger kids of US generations may see BTS as a modern boy band, although in US culture, boy bands are really not a thing anymore. But when it comes to marketing a memory and majority of nostalgia without memory, cultural histories and timelines are getting merged, and the lines between like the past and what is real is becoming more and more blurred. As the past, present, and future are mixed up by the globalization of these songs and nostalgia without memory of the actual culture. The last topic I want to talk about is how Appadurai and Seiji both point out that countries tend to fear the cultural assimilation of nearby countries, not just in K-pop, but also Hallyu. This is another consequence of the globalization, as countries like China, Russia, and Turkey, as I mentioned earlier, say that K-pop has changed how the ideal man should look and how they should be. Some may say that K-pop has turned the ideal man into something more feminine and less strong and independent, which I think is a little ridiculous, but these countries take this very seriously, and do not want their people to be influenced by this kind of idea, and are scared of the idea of their men becoming less powerful.
Hi, this is Kira, and I will be talking about current affairs that relate to the readings from this week. Finally, looking at current affairs, we can see many examples of Seiji's arguments in the real world. Media anthropologist and ethnographer Erica Wang compiled a fascinating collection of information in her study called Squid Game Outside the Wall: Fandom Nationalism in China and Negotiation with State Power. The study was focused on the overall online reactions to the release of the Korean TV show Squid Game, which was mostly impacted by the overall power of the Chinese party. With such strict policies limiting the ability to access international TV shows and programs, interaction with the show proved difficult, and many netizens had to find ways to break the Great Firewall. Wang used a digital ethnography of two social media platforms, Weibo and Red, to identify and follow two vastly different opinions towards the show. She found that one of the opinions was heavily influenced by the power of fandom nationalism, and the other was presented through a type of disguised nationalism. Within the study, Wang highlighted the ongoing debates over the representation of Chinese and Korean cultural studies, often with Chinese netizens criticizing Korean media for the threat of cultural invasion, along with cultural appropriation and plagiarism. This brings into light the concept of fandom nationalism, which Wang describes as the tendency for the nation to become the object of unconditional worship and defense. Fandom nationalism has been used on numerous occasions by Chinese netizens in defense of their state and is believed to be a patriotic act, and is now deemed an important weapon to party state propaganda. When it came to the discussion of Squid Game amongst Chinese audiences, many netizens spoke with anti-Korean attitudes, criticizing the show and creating the belief that the show is too violent, vulgar, and toxic. However, the opposite side of the argument brings into light something far more fascinating. Those Wang described as disguised nationalists would begin their statements towards Squid Game with anti-Korean attitudes. However, they would use self-censorship and an anti-Korean stance in order to disguise their true feelings towards the show. Those within a fandom nationalism mindset believe that those in support of Korean media are unpatriotic or corrupted by toxic Hallyu. Next, we see how K-pop fans have used social media platforms to address social issues, becoming a force to be reckoned with in the world of political activism. A study completed by Priscilla Kim and Dr. Ethan Hutt found that K-pop has become a social movement, especially when looking at the group BTS and ARMY, their fandom. While some K-pop groups or idols remain silent in times of upheaval, many groups such as BTS are seen aiding social groups in their causes. The best example of this is highlighted by Kim and Hutt. During the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, BTS donated $1 million to the movement. Influenced by the generosity of their idols, ARMY continued the trend, raising and matching the 1 million donated by BTS to the Black Lives Matter movement in less than 24 hours. Social upheaval and the Black Lives Matter movement brought into light the power of the K-pop fans as allies and online vigilantes in the fight for social justice. Through their efforts in the digital realm, K-pop fans proved to the masses their ability to unite in an organized way to amplify and demand for social change. Kim and Hut find that K-pop fans in the past few years have been consistent, intentional, and powerfully united with such social movements. Thus, through studying K-pop fans and their tendency to support social movements, Hut and Kim identified a possible potential for their work as political activists to have a positive change in our future. While we see that K-pop fans have used their strength as fans to demand for social change, their methods of doing so are fascinating and have been used in numerous ways over the past few years. One of the tools used by K-pop fans in the fight for social justice is the use of hashtags to increase engagement with global trends. Posting with hashtags on various social media platforms brings current affairs into light. In this way, we see how K-pop fans wield social media as one of their weapons. One example of this occurred in May 2020 when K-pop fans spammed a police scanner app for the Dallas Police Department, successfully shutting down the app. The Dallas police were asking for videos of protest activity, but K-pop fans spammed the app with fan cams instead. Another example of the collective efforts of K-pop fans took place in June 2020 when K-pop fans reserved tickets for a Trump rally. Attendance was expected to be over 1 million people, however the actual attendance was just over 6,000. Some fans continued to cause interference after the rally by adding items from the Trump website into their carts and never purchasing them. Through shared love for the music and fandom life, we see the tendency for K-pop fans to unite and fight for social justice. Kim and Hut said it best in the quote at the bottom of the slide, because K-pop fans are much more than fans. They too are human.
In conclusion, as we have seen from everyone's contributions, the cultural phenomenon that we're seeing now is the result of these intersecting landscapes, the shift of people, money, media, ideas, and technology, all of which are having a profound impact on cultures around the world. And those cultures, in turn, are contributing to this shifting landscape, creating and interacting and continually shifting network of landscapes, so to say, cultural landscapes. And so the resulting phenomena that we see, such as Hallyu, this wave of uh, interest in Korean media, or that intersection of Hallyu with politics and economics, is not the result of a singular cultural landscape or political intervention, but rather a result of multiple types of cultural flows happening in tandem. Ultimately, we're going to continue seeing this moving forward with the continual globalization, continual interaction between cultures, meaning that we're going to see more of Apadurai's idea of this chaos theory and the landscapes of culture as this interconnection makes the boundaries of time and space between cultures less and less distinct, making it harder and harder to define states, markets, and societies by simple categorizations. Thank you so much. Here are our works cited.